Good morning, everybody. We've got a great show for you here today. We've got PeaceLoveMusic in the house, pulling double duty as the co-host and the producer. And we have got Mike from Attract Funding, who is an absolute gigabrain when it comes to AI. This is an important show today, I believe, because we really want to pick Mike's brain and see where everything's headed. It feels like we're at a convergence moment here. And before we get into all of those things, we do want to give a shout out to our partners at Velar. If you are not aware, and if you're in this space, how could you not be? But just in case you're not aware, Velar is a pioneering DeFi liquidity protocol built on the Stacks blockchain. Now, Stacks, again, you should know this already, but we're going to go over it. Stacks itself is a smart contract platform anchored to Bitcoin, and it allows us to use smart contracts on Bitcoin and allows us to use this in such ways like decentralized finance, otherwise known as DeFi. So DeFi on Bitcoin looks like DeFi with the security of the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, some things you need to look out for. One in particular is the perp DEX coming to Velar. You're talking about decentralized futures trading on Bitcoin. Okay. So we're not talking about institutions holding your tokens. We're not talking about, KYC. We're talking about the freedom to transact. And when you have something like the perp DEX, not only can you leverage trade your Bitcoin to whether that is to hedge, whether that is to make a little go a little further, it also provides people a chance to get yield on their Bitcoin. And Velar is not only doing this on Stacks, they're also on Bob and BitLayer, and they will be on some of the up and coming L2s as well. So take a chance, take a moment, get ahead of the curve, and see what Velar has going on today. All right, guys. So, so thanks for coming in, Mike. Look, it's a very exciting time here on the Stack side. We've already got some AI development working on several different applications for AI agents. You see on Solana, they're starting to do some AI based tokens, and now there's like this development fund that is just doing crazy. So I see crypto changing in ways that even if you're here and you're terminally online and a part of this, you still don't fully appreciate what's going to happen. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about a technology that's going to change every aspect of life. So give us a little bit, man. Tell us about yourself and tell us where your head's at these days.
Sure. So if this is our first time meeting, my name is Michael Jagdao. I am a coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside, living in the socialist democracy known as Canada, right? So I am myself a walking racial vocal contradiction, which makes me perfect to understand this market. So I'm in Canada, and some tech people have come out of here. So I'm lucky from that perspective. There's a lot of smart people in and around Toronto that have been pioneering for years. So to give you just some background, I'm a headhunter launching startups with the syndicate. And I didn't start as a developer. I wasn't smart enough to do math. I wasn't smart enough to do chemistry or physics. The only thing I could do was business. And so I was like, okay, I don't think I'll be unemployed with a business degree. And I started recruiting actuaries back in the not 20s, but back when I was 20. Maybe I call that my 20s. And now I'm still recruiting people, but I learned how to code a few years ago. And I learned how to code right before ChatGPT came out. And because I have mentors in the syndicate like Paul, Vance, and Rocky that can kind of hold my hand and help me when I'm freaking out, I'm just as amazed as you are. So I'll stop there. We can go to a lot of different places, but there's a lot of innovation happening, whether it's AI, BTC, Dev, or Dave, BFF. There's a lot of people who see what's happening, but we have actually two worlds, right? AI is not necessarily interested in crypto. Does that make sense?
Right.
Right? They were trying to do stuff with language, right? The Web2 world uses algorithmic trading, obviously, but a lot of the recent work hasn't been on the from a public perspective. It hasn't been on the financial side, right? It's been on the language side, but now we're having that.
That's true. No, that's true. Peace, man. How you doing today? Thank you as
I'm doing
always.
great, man. Dude, I'm loving life right now, to be honest. I really think the trajectory we are on in our space is amazing. DeOrganized is growing and just becoming more productive, and our processes are getting cooler. We got more, people. You're part of the team now. LMNO's joined. We've got other stuff going on where we're gonna, the 300 has been making content. We got Giga Pepe on regular. Like, it's just growing the space. And there's just, we had two awesome shows last week with Chente and Andre for SBTC and Chente for Alex. And it's just, I'm doing awesome, man. And I'm so glad we got a chance to get Mike on the show because, I'm very familiar with what he's doing. And super impressed and amazed at all the stuff he keeps just iterating over, like, and how rapid the pace is, which is kind of because of the tools involved, right? As you learn to use these tools, the pace is just going to keep increasing more and more rapidly. It's amazing. So yeah, man, thank you for having me on this morning. And I love what you're doing too. Obviously, all the cool stuff. It's just all the stuff going on with Rue and the runes and the USDH deal. Just amazing stuff going on in the space all over the place. AI and beyond.
When you look at like from a crypto perspective, which is where I kind of live, we always like to say Ethereum is a test net or was a test net. There is a lot of truth to that because DeFi on Ethereum was a lot of iteration, a lot of people testing ideas, seeing how it's going to work. And now we're to this point where you've had a period of a few years, basically, where people could refine ideas. And when you take things like stacks, which is essentially, if you cut it right down, Ethereum on Bitcoin, you're really now looking at ways to have DeFi on Bitcoin. What's that going to look like? Well, now it also looks like there's probably going to be an AI component to this as well, And so where I'm sitting, crypto is about to change itself, and then it's about to change because of the AI part, and then it's about to change because of, now we're on the cusp of mass adoption. So even if you've been here a while, everything is about the tables are about to be just flipped right over. It's to be a whole new paradigm, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. Like, what's your advice, Mike, to people who may have their exposure to AI thus far has just been playing around with the language models, right? The LLMs, because I was talking to a buddy the other day, and that's his thing. Like, he's using the latest iteration of ChatGPT as a study aid while he's working on his education, right? And he's in the medical field, and he even has residents that he works with, and he's like, hey, check this out. And everyone's leveling up just by using this as a study aid. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
It's the answer always depends on the person's experience and skill level, I find, right? So sometimes I find I run into the challenge of just talking in too much generics about this stuff. So maybe if we can focus on what type of person are you thinking about in this case? Are they a beginner, intermediate, or advanced?
Definitely beginner, because I think a lot of people are still asleep.
Okay, beautiful. So we're talking to a person that maybe in the past few months or even year has become a proficient user of ChatGPT.
Okay,
right? So they know how to use ChatGPT. They can get it to write reports, and they can get it to do spell check, and they can get it to do their work for work or work for homework. That's typically kind of the world they live in. So imagine you could fund your ChatGPT account with $1,000 and say, go nuts. That's where we are today.
Right.
Typically, algorithmic trading has been reserved for people with the funding to do it. Right? You got to be huge. You got to data centers, but now I can fork an actuary. Yeah. Right? An actuary is a statistical expert in finance. These are the financial engineers. Imagine being able to say, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to act like an actuary at McKinsey and backtest a genetic algorithm for trading meme coins on stx.city. By the way, the endpoint is this.
Right.
So what people are doing is creating, essentially, we're all creating ChatGPT wrappers, right? No Diddy, right? Gotta say it once an episode, right? You're gonna say no. No, I don't want to say the other thing. Allegedly. So, but imagine giving your ChatGPT account, Connect Wallet. Here's $1,000. Hey, I want you to. I'm 30 years till maturity, so I have a risk profile of such. Go nuts. What mix of fiat and digital currency strategies would you suggest? And I guarantee you, if you ask it to act like an actuary, it'll start giving you precise formula. A lot of the times with beginners, they just don't understand the precise nomenclature language chemistry, you know what I mean? To get that piece. Like I was working yesterday on a visualization, and Vance told me, hey, you should think about it in terms of branches, not parent and children. And I'm like, oh, branches. What's going on, Brianna?
So there's your spot for people like yourself and people who are on the more advanced section of the paradigm to build the tools to get to those beginner users to unlock that. Because my father-in-law is a great man. I love him to death. He's an old country boy boomer, but he's a really smart guy and very talented. And he used to trade just stocks back in the day, before everything was online, before like when you actually had to call somebody and get. And he said, you could really tell when it changed. When he stopped was when the big institutions really started the algorithmic trading. He said, that's where my edge went away. And that's where we're going to be right here in our space.
That is the key. I don't think that people understand what your father-in-law experienced with his own wallet earnings. So my background is I'm very privileged. Maybe that's the inner part of the coconut, right? And so I grew up in Toronto, right? And even though I was growing up in a basement for part of my life, I still got good enough grades because my parents were teachers to allow me to go to a school that ended up being top 13 in the rankings globally, right? And so it's always kind of embarrassing talking about this because I realized that I don't want to talk down to people. This is just what I see going to school with people who taught at Princeton and shit like that, right? So there are a few things to think about for the new traders to understand what your father-in-law understood. The first name to look up is Jack Bogle. Jack Bogle wrote a thesis in the 50s called the Index Fund. And if you're familiar with Vanguard,
yeah,
right, what are they at, $7 trillion? They were invented and made all their money because of Bogle. Bogle did the research and said, all you stock pickers, none of you can beat the S&P 500 on a time span of 15 years or more. And the hedge fund people were like, yeah, we know that. Don't tell anyone, basically. But by Jack Bogle creating the index fund, there was analysis at Vanguard They've made $7 trillion by sitting back and betting on the all-star team of the S&P 500. Most traders are only alive, including all the large banks, because we bail them out when their derivatives and investments and options go to shit.
Right.
Does that make sense? The
Oh,
only reason any bank in America is alive today, if you don't see me on tomorrow's show, you'll understand why, is because the only reason that their fancy trading strategies work is because we bail them out.
Well, they don't.
That's the only reason. So if you look in Europe, what happened to Credit Suisse? It's called Credit Suisse. What do you mean it's gone? The derivative exposure from these algorithmic tradings is in the quadrillions.
Wow.
So that's part of it. Jack Bogle, 50s, Princeton, everyone's lying to each other. If you just bet on the all-star team like Moneyball, you will have the best portfolio. But most people want to be swashbucklers in finance. I'm going to do my own research and find some alpha. Now, good luck, like your father-in-law noticed, trying to find alpha when you have machines that don't sleep.
Right.
That ostensibly have access to the world's memory and are innately actuaries, right? So OpenBB right now is disrupting a lot of stuff by creating their own open Bloomberg terminal.
Wow.
So you can bring in the stacks data and bring in the price and maybe even do training inside. And so the first thing you realize is that most of the big players, whoever the JP Morgans are of this space, and it's JP Morgan really, is there's something called odd lot theory. And it's a way that the big players make fun of little traders. What they've found is that people who trade stock in small amounts always lose. And so all you have to do is find the people trading small parcels of stock and bet against them. Odd lot theory.
Wow. Yeah.
Now with AI agents, algorithmic traders coming in en masse to places like Stacks overnight through AI, a lot of the alpha that people have been enjoying because this wasn't possible, that alpha is going to change drastically. And it's going to be overnight almost. A lot of people are going to find overnight that they wake up and their trading strategies that were very profitable all of a sudden have dissipated in value.
Right. And so when you look at that aspect of it, and if you take it a step further into things that are native to crypto more so, or at least more obviously than they are to things in a traditional world, you know, I think we're going to see very soon every aspect of any kind of meme coin or any kind of crypto launch. So for instance, one of the problems that traditional businesses who wanted to make the jump into Web3 have faced is they just can't pull it off. They don't have the requisite understanding of the dynamics to hit that market appeal and to get that attention. I think we're going to start seeing more crypto projects being run from AI and having an AI as like the face of it, and have these agents that are responding to real-time data in the moment. And then so not only from the financial piece, but you're also, you know, getting the best responsiveness on social media and so forth, and how to adjust messaging and how to reach new users. So that in and of itself is going to be a completely different ball game here real soon, you know.
Imagine somebody spun up a competitor to CNBC and had people that look like everyone on CNBC, but just accessed with API data. This just in, that thing just went to the moon. Does that make sense? You know how they're always talking to someone in their ear? Imagine a host that just has like APIs like in their brain feeding you information, right? Digital PeaceLoveMusic. We talked about that before, right? We joked about that, but I know you see it.
Yeah. No, that's crazy, man. And then so we're really on the precipice of big change in this space that's already ahead of the mainstream culture in many ways. And so I think that the culture shock coming is going to be beyond crypto. It's going to be beyond I mean, for one thing, I look forward to being able to not have to spend so much time researching and learning, and where I can just be like, look, this is what I'm looking for, find it, adjust my strategy, right? But what about just your average person? Like, how is this stuff going as far as you can tell? If you're gonna Nostradamus this here for a moment, what does the next couple years look like for just how the average person's life is going to be impacted by this technology, and not just these kind of jobs might be made redundant or whatever. Everyone kind of focuses on that. I'm just talking like you wake up, you start your day, and now this is a world where AI is a part of your life, just like the internet's a part of your life now. What might that look like?
There's so many ways you can go with this, right? I can go to the complete end of the story where all of our brains have atrophied because we don't use it to make decisions anymore.
Right.
That's the first thing I think of.
And that's not hyperbole, because you can see what social media has done to people's attention spans. Like, there's something to it. The ancient Greeks were fond of, like, relaying stories and oral tradition because they believed it was better for the brain. And as writing became more ingrained in the societies, they're like, this is going to make people dumber. So you're 100% right.
We saw this with GPS. When GPS got invented, actual spatial, like geospatial recognition started faltering in the users, right? I think it was Sam Harris that brought that up. And so back before TDS. And so, so the atrophy thing I see, right? I also worry about the quote unquote average person, because I was privileged from an education perspective. My parents were teachers from Guyana, taught by the British, who had school at home and I had school at school. I was reading the Odyssey pocket version when I was 9. So my brain has been seeped in information and reading, right? And I'm in my 40s now. What is the level of literacy today with folks? I think it's going down. And to the extent that you're not literate, you can't even read the Bible, so to speak, whatever your Bible is. That's the danger I see. The level of literacy is kind of like locking people out. Go ahead, Peace.
I would say that there's a mixed bag there, because the people that do engage more in social media, there is different kind of exercise of written communication or typed communication. And that kind of conversational engagement is actually maybe even more widespread. But yeah, of course, there's also so I'm dealing with such a huge, much more volume of information now than I was 20 years ago, because it's just access. So I also don't have the mental capacity to keep track of all of this data that I'm absorbing all the time. So we need it feels like our capacity to recall data and make decisions is waning, but I think it's partially because it's a bandwidth issue for individuals. We have so much more data we're dealing with now. Of course it's harder to make a decision because you have to weigh so much more data to make that decision, where now we're starting to offload some of that bandwidth capacity to the machines.
It used to be machines. Now it's a human-like voice, just like we use my wife's voice.
That's just what the machine looks like. It's just a prettier hammer, right?
But they don't perceive it in the same way, right? That's the dangerous part. So it's like, okay, instead of offloading my investment to ChatGPT with a wallet, let's give it to James, the guy who's 6'4" with a blue eyes and an Adam's apple the size of Gibraltar. Right? So with AI agents, you don't feel like you're hiring an agent. Does that make sense?
Right. The BTC Chad meme face is going to be our our authoritarian figure.
Because we perceive divinity through anthropomorphism, right?
Right.
God, a lot of people think God is made in their own image rather than the other way around. No,
Right.
I wasn't there when the universe was created, right? But the more we add human modalities to things, the more this thought about I'm talking to an agent kind of goes away, right? So I think we're also on that precipice of we're about to add more what they call affective computing. You ever heard of that? Affective computing?
No,
Using the emotional data as
Oh,
inputs and
wow.
outputs. Yeah, it's scary.
No,
I haven't
and
heard
you're right.
said is and that's I mean, there have been people or organizations getting together to study the effect of emotions and how to manipulate emotions and how to drive behavior through the manipulation of emotions for a couple centuries at least, right? That we have record of, that we've been building this collective database as humans. So of course that's what the AI is going to be built around, because it's built around. So the reason to build something like that is marketing, which is the same reason for studying how to manipulate emotion, right? It's marketing based. You're trying to compel people to do certain behaviors based on whatever influence you can tweak.
Behavior modification.
So, right. So that's what AI is going to be used for, to a large degree. If it's allowed to be isolated and we don't have it open and available access to the average people so that they have their own agents that are working to protect them from that.
So that's a doom and gloom scenario. So we have doom and gloom, and then we have the other side, what we haven't talked about, which is all the cool ways we're using it. But it's easy to talk about.
Let's talk about the cool stuff, because
all right.
I personally am not a doom and gloomer, because I believe in the power of the decentralized Bitcoin network. I think at its base, that's a bulwark that is hard to defeat, right? I believe probably impossible, but you can never say never. But I think it's a hell of a good start. So as long as we have a decentralized network to build on top of, I think we don't have to go doom and gloom,
So, for example, that visual, we were talking about Velar right before the show started, and we were looking for the URL. One of the things I used AI to do was part of it is when we say working with AI, I think some people think that we're just like AI, right? And you just cast a spell on your computer and all of a sudden it does stuff. Whenever I say working with AI, it's always I'm asking questions to my mentors, which are physical human people, as far as I know, right? And I'm using what I know, and then I'm using AI in this enterprise threesome, is what we call it at this point, right? So an enterprise ménage à trois. Right? And so I used Python, which is a data science language, to scrape information, right, about all the investors and who are the key players and all that stuff. And then I used AI to help me create a visualization, because I noticed that a lot of people, I was wrestling with the onboarding question a lot, which is like, how do you onboard someone, right? You give them a chat bot, they don't even know what to ask, right? So after talking to Stu, he said people don't know what to look for and where to look or how to look. One of the ideas was creating that visualization, which is, here it is. What do you want to start? NFTs, tokens, currencies, wallets, DeFi, and then you can just click around, right? And that's one of the solutions that I created with AI, cursor.com. That's right, cursor.com is what I'm using right now. It's like an addition to Visual Studio Code. And I have tons of examples that I could share with you on all the stuff that I was able to do as a enterprise backseat driver, is basically what it feels like right now.
No, and I think that's going to be like, I think one of the positive things that we can look forward to is, humans at their core one of the things that makes us human is creativity, right? Like this is what it means to be human at a fundamental level. So I think that the more things that we can automate, the more time that we'll be free to almost become more self-actualized, and especially in terms of, okay, my current schedule is I get 8 hours of sleep, and then I have 8 hours of work, and then I have, a few hours to eat dinner, wash myself, say hi to the kids, go back to bed. Like, I think that cycle is about to be disrupted in and of itself. And I think having to be terminally online to an extent is also going to also be interrupted in a lot of ways. But that's why I'm curious to see what you think.
So before I was doing this, I was doing stand-up comedy.
I could believe that.
And I had a mentor, just like here, Quincy Martin. He's amazing, my best friend. And he was teaching me the ropes. And I think it's really key for the really kind of people who are sold on this to talk about just some basics in terms of creative science. Because I think one of the things I take for granted is I actually have a creative life cycle that follows how comedy works that I use for software. So Peace Love talked about the rate of iteration change, right? So that's what stand-up comedy is. Think of a joke at home. You go on stage, find out it's terrible, go back home depressed, cry yourself to sleep, modify the joke, and go back out again. So in Toronto, open micers will go out 4 places a single night, and try out jokes. And that's how they iterate so fast. So just for the recording, I'll say just a few things on creativity. Kessler, who wrote a book called The Act of Creation, which was read by George Carlin, which we all know. Kessler said that all acts of creation are generated by the sudden bisociation of previously unrelated matrices of experience. All acts of creation are generated by the sudden bisociation of previously unrelated matrices of experience. So, for example, Dave Chappelle had a joke about Sesame Street, how Sesame Street is like the hood, right? And people go, hey, Oscar, why are you such a grouch? And you're like, bitch, I live in a trash can. You know what I mean? That's a guy who doesn't have a house. So that's relating Sesame Street, one domain of experience, and another domain of experience, and finding Oscar the Grouch as the bisociation, right? So these 2 worlds. So that's one source of creativity. Bisociating 2 domains, that's what a pun is, right? A pun connects 2 domains that are seemingly disparate, and the laughter is caused by the cognitive dissonance. The other type of creativity is thinking in opposites. Greeks called it, or the Romans called it, Janushan thinking, right? To think in opposites. So it's peanut butter and jelly or thinking in opposites with rapid iteration where you don't feel bad because the prototype failed. I think once people understand that, there's a lot of research on the creative life cycle, right? Illumination, brilliance, this has all been studied. And the more you understand the process of creation itself, then AI can become really powerful for you.
Yeah, no, and that's true. I like that idea of where you're bypassing the crashing and burning and recovery period, because that's all success is. Like, if you're going to be successful in anything, you're going to fail, and then it depends on how long it takes you to recover from the failure and what you've learned from the failure to move on to the next part. And so that's a great insight. Like that, yeah,
because it's an emotional process to fail.
Right.
The reason that most software companies fail is because they take too long to introduce their prototype to the end user. And they spend like 8 months building this beautiful software, present it to the end user. The end user says something that's completely out of left field. And they're like, crap, to make those changes, we're going to have to spend another 12 months. And I have found that my track record in startups proves that I am not a visionary. In fact, anything but a Nostradamus. But I can go on stage with my jokes and listen to their response and hold on to the feedback and get back on stage again and again. And as long as I'm not emotionally tied to the prototype, I can hear the feedback for what it is.
No, that's really cool, man. That's a good insight. So, and again, when you're going back into crypto markets or any markets at this point, here in the US, it looks like we're finally to a point where people are paying a significant enough amount of attention to some things that have historically in recent history led to kind of holding back a lot of progress, right? Specifically when you talk about regressive tax systems, specifically when you talk about overregulation, specifically when you talk about, having to cut through 6 layers of bureaucracy to potentially bring one new thing to market. So if we're sitting here where we find a situation where these things are lessened to a great extent at this particular juncture, where you have a financial revolution in the making, and you now have this whole new way to, I don't even know how to sum up AI as a revolution, but you just have this whole new way to interact with the world and to create. I think as you lose those layers of regulation, I think you have, and then if you add in cheap energy and potentially, at some point free energy, you're on the verge of a golden age for all of humanity here.
Keep in mind, we are all this innovation is happening in the crucible of the political, legal, and regulatory environment. And there are large organizations that are lobbying the government to crowd out the little guy. Or haven't you noticed? This stuff costs a lot of energy. Not talking about the energy they already used. When everyone talks about proof of work, I feel like, are you a fucking idiot? You think proof of work is expensive? Have you ever thought to ask how much energy is being used to run the current system?
Right.
You ever think about that? I'm like, you're so worried about proof of work that you've never stopped to ask yourself what the current cost of running as-is data centers are. I don't know. That always blew my mind.
No,
it seems like the obtuse Olympics.
You're right. Like,
part of that is because of the way the talking points get disseminated through the current social media networks. People are constantly told these narratives to focus on,
right,
and never really given the opportunity to consider that what you're talking about, like how much energy is spent on point of sale purchase now, and all of the energy spent to build that out. It's way more than Bitcoin, actually. The current financial network uses up tons of electricity with our current digitized financial system.
If you look at industry, okay, take an industry that no one thinks that's relatively benign. Well, at least was. Take healthcare. Okay, there's a lot of things to do within healthcare that you need specific licenses for based on the amount of need in a geographical area, right? So if Medicare, which is our like socialized system, says, okay, for this state, we think we only need 100 hospice agencies. So there's 100 licenses, and that's all you can get. Now, let's say someone wants to enter that market. You might have big national level agencies that own 40 of those, 50 of them right away, and they're buying as many as they can from people who already have them. And then you have the whole of the industry lobbying against making it easier for more licensure, or making it harder to issue the license that already exists. So that's just one little aspect. And so you wind up with that centralization of everything. And to keep that centralized power structure in place, that's a great point. That is a huge energy sink.
I like to call that just lawfare. Right. All that is just lawfare, right? Now, Magnus Pompey said, don't quote laws to men who have swords. That's what I see we're on the cusp of. We live in a world where Roger Ver's in jail 2 weeks after releasing hijacking Bitcoin, right? We saw Pavel from Telegram said, hey, come over here, right? And 2 weeks later, hey, we just installed a backdoor in Telegram to make everybody's life safer. And
Right.
be like, now you can get out of jail. So that's what I'm seeing. And with the startups I'm working on, I'm very insistent on understanding the political, legal, and regulatory environment, because that is the fulcrum upon which these startups live and die.
Right.
Right. You know, I'm not sure where Do Kwon is. Is he out yet? You know what I mean? Like, we forget about a lot of the people that have literally been incarcerated
Right.
through being ostensibly successful in these markets. And so when I work with folks, I'm like, yes, we can do AI. Just because we can launch it tomorrow doesn't mean we can all be on the right side of the bars and operate the business. So a lot of the times I'm actually telling people to pull the brakes.
Right.
I know we can snap our fingers and do blah, 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 blah. But guys, got to step back. If you want to do this and engage in financial services, essentially, there are a myriad of licenses. Now, you can call that protectionism. You can call that consumer safety. Depends which side of the negotiating table you're on.
Right. And that's the part that needs to be dismantled. I mean, and I think
the opinions of Jack do not necessarily reflect those of Attract Funding.
No, this goes without saying.
So
I'm a
I
Fiat
don't
Maxi
know that
official.
is necessarily. It needs to be redefined, right? It needs to be redefined how we set up these structures, and I think the missing piece at the individual level is the capacity to consent. We do not have the capacity to withdraw consent. Therefore, we do not have a consensual relationship with government right now. That's a problem. We need social organization. So it's not going to get completely dismantled. We have to transcend and include. That's how we move forward. So you have the capacity to wage violence, but you don't want to wage violence because you want to experience a peaceful world. So if you wage violence, you can't experience the world you want to experience. So we have to transcend our capacity to wage violence, but include it within ourselves, because there is a valuable use and tool of having the capacity to wage violence, but we have to transcend that tool so that we're not using it in contradiction to the world we want to experience.
Rocky said we have to commit all our crimes in GTA where it's safe. Sorry, Rocky. Not a direct quote, but you get it. He's like, keep them in GTA, keep them in the basements, have them do it there.
Right. No, and that's true. And it's just at the end of the day, the reality is that, you know, there's so much effort put into stopping progress that now we can kind of look back and see, we're probably done screwed the pooch here. Like, we should be a much wealthier nation. We should have more opportunities. And it is the result of, well, a myriad of things, you know, but a lot of it to do with centralized, you know, power, government waste, endless wars, all of these kinds of things. But we're really, like, if we as a people, and I think that's where Elon Musk is coming from with, you know, all of these speeches he's been given recently, is look, if we want, his thesis is bad stuff happens to Earth, we really, really would like to be able to save human consciousness if at all possible. This is our best way to do it. We need to make that as easy as possible to be done. But that same logic can be applied to so many aspects of our current reality, not just sending rockets to Mars. And so that's why people need to be like, wait, what are we really doing here? What does freedom really mean? What does progress really mean? I think these words, as they're used, probably aren't being, you know, true to the definition that we think they are, right? So no, you're right. And it is sad to see that. And I do feel for people who have great things that they could be bringing to market right now, and they're just so worried about crossing every line, dotting every T, dotting every I, crossing every T, just trying to be as perfect as they can. And then guess what? When you get into like the US, for instance, we have so many rules and regulations that you can be following some to the best that you can possibly do and still be breaking other ones.
It's like that Ocean's 11. You remember when the acrobat has like the laser trying to get at him and he's just like jumping through the thing? That's what it's like.
Yeah. And I mean, it's worse in the EU. And people have to, people have
think
to
on the bright side, at least we're not the EU.
Right. We've got that for us, like they're finally like, hey guys, maybe we have too many regulations and we're kind of retarding progress here. You think?
Hey, GPSC, what's going on? You finally woke up, huh?
The sentiment from because we actually have, one of the things I love about the space we're in is how diverse and how broadly spread throughout the globe the people involved are. I'm talking to people all over the place all the time. Haddy specifically is in EU right now. Nick, who runs Bitcoin Live, is in the EU. The general, the anecdotal, admittedly, but the general consensus from people in that area is that the populace is getting tired of the bullshit that the EU establishment has been pushing. And there's a lot of pushback from the public against some of their over-regulatory agenda.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, if you wanted to make the transition from horse and buggies to vehicles in the regulatory environment that we have now, going from horseshoes and dirt roads to pavement and internal combustion engines, we'd still all be riding horses, right?
Carriage manufacturers would own the politicians and it would never happen.
If you think about it, the more you can prevent the early majority from knowing about this, the more you can control it before they ever arrive.
Right, which is exactly what happened to Bitcoin.
So we should expect that in the news that this is either mischaracterized or simply omitted. And if it's being ignored, it's not really being ignored.
Right.
They are willfully omitting it.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, so I'm glad you brought that up because I've been paying attention to Bitcoin since 2017. And all the same players that are now buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin spent all of that time up until very, very recently saying it's tulips, it's pet rocks, it's this, it's garbage, it's going to zero. Right. Meanwhile, everything they're doing on their
accumulation
end has been to accumulate. And that could just as easily happen with AI. And that speaks truth to the point you just made. I mean, that's the most real example of that.
I don't want that. You want that? Yeah, go ahead, have it. Oh, you don't want it? All right, I'll have it. That's how like West Indians handle the bill. I'll get that. No, you're gonna get it. No, I'll get it. No, you're gonna get it. By the third time, you're like, okay, you get it, right? So it's kind of one of those things where they cannot be seen to embrace it.
Right.
They cannot actually be seen to be on its side. Just like Constantine and Catholicism, he has to simply respond to what the population is changing. So the population went from Zeus and Stoicism to Jesus Christ. Okay. Constantine, as the emperor, embraces Christianity. Some people thought he converted. Maybe he just saw which way the population winds were blowing.
Right.
And finally appeased. Those are the kind of the two political.
And you're starting to see that now with the political talk really within days now, where, it's like, now we're talking about things that would have been unheard to hear the mainstream media discuss relative
heresy.
Right. It would have been. And now it's like, well,
paganism.
Okay, so Washington Post, one of the big newspapers here, wouldn't they wouldn't endorse either for the presidential election, Kamala or Trump. And everyone had a conniption fit, because since they've been endorsing presidents for the last 100 years, they've almost exclusively endorsed one party, right? And now you're starting to see even that, like the big gears that turn the world, starting to do exactly what you're saying, your thesis in terms of Constantine. Are they now true believers, or are they going with the public sentiment in a way to, remain relevant? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's 100% true.
It's
writing on the wall, and they don't want to endorse what is the likely loser.
Keep in mind that for them, I mean, let's be honest. Let's hope nobody's really watching this. It's just us, right? It's just us talking. If they accepted it, wouldn't there be widespread panic in the market, right? If a politician said, "All right, guys, Bitcoin is cool now,"
right,
there'd be widespread panic. And I think that we are balancing freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is American, and Canadians' peace, order, and good government. And these are the two things that people side on. You want peace, order, and good government, then we have to we're going to have centralization by security. You want peace, you want freedoms and pursuit of happiness, great. You can have those too. Buyer beware.
Right. Yeah. And that's just the whole thing. When you go back to the founding fathers of this country, it was understood, through writings, through their writings in their lifetimes. And I think I can't remember if it was Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson who basically said, you can have freedom or you can have security.
Right.
You've got one of the two, so I personally am always going to be more bent towards freedom, because at the end of the day, security is an illusion. I mean, the amount of control you have over your own circumstances that you think you have is an illusion. There's nothing set in stone in life, but you should at least have the freedom to do what you feel is right, as motivated by your conscience, provided that you're not hurting anyone else. But that's how I fall on it. And so if you're going to see more of a push towards centralization and so forth, which I think is kind of getting really slowed down right now, I think that the next step you would probably see are more, like what Bahali calls the network state type model, this parallel government type model.
That's what I want to say. So I've been looking at, John Jay?
Yes.
So I've been reading a lot about John Jay. I did a mind map.
Wild.
That dude was crazy. And so I realized that if a network state, just like America, is going to exist, you're going to need John Jays out there keeping British, French, and Spanish interests aligned.
Right.
John Jay spent a lot of time overseas writing letters to people that didn't want America to be independent. And somehow we figured out a way to diplomatize that. Balaji, right now with Electra and friends, are starting up a new network state university. And where are they doing it? Singapore.
Yeah.
A special economic zone.
Right.
Shenzhen, Hong Kong. These are special economic zones that are being carved out. And we also see this, by the way, with the Texas Stock Exchange.
Right.
And BRICS. So people are deciding for themselves, we're going to break away. Like BlackRock and Citadel are setting up the Texas Stock Exchange. Are you nuts? That's like the biggest news on the planet, right? But these things are purposefully ignored and omitted, and it's scary. And I think they're omitting it because they get to be early in on the trade, and they've been ignoring this since 2009, ostensibly.
Right. No, 100%. And that's the thing. Like it's just like we were talking about when we first started. You have your edge until you don't. And now we're at the place where people can potentially have an entirely new edge. So as we're about to wrap up here, um, again, talking to someone who's at a beginning level of where we're at with AI, what should they do to prepare for the changes that are coming and coming rapidly? What's some good advice for those folks?
Well, if you're just starting out now, and you're a beginner with AI, I want you to get upset at yourself for wasting your time over the past 5 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the first step. If you are just getting introduced to this now, you have the wrong friend group. Does that make sense? Like, honestly, like your friends
Right.
aren't helping you. I only know this stuff because of Twitter Spaces. I'm connected to California, to Arkansas, to Washington, to Gujarat. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been heads down learning for the past, it feels like 15 years. I don't go out and I don't really have fun the way typical people do. I really enjoy this. If you're a beginner right now, you are around the wrong friends and you need to change your friend group. Because in order to really know about what's happening, you need to be plugged into a collective consciousness node. For Stacks, you guys are the collective consciousness node, which is why I want your transcripts to make the AI smarter. And I want that knowledge of body fresh. So to be appropriately harsh to the beginners, if you are still a beginner, you are around the wrong people. You can get around the right people. And once you immerse yourself without, when people encounter AI truly for the first time, they start questioning their own divinity because their divinity was created on their ability to use language. And so I find that a lot of smart people actually avoid AI because they're intimidated by it. And you should be intimidated by it. We can be intimidated together. Right? But get around different people because it's through the people that I'm learning. The AI helps me get answers, but the quality of my answers are only as good as the quality of the people influencing my thinking and my questions.
Cool. It's just like the world's greatest lever at this point, right? That's where we're at. And if you're not using leverage, then you're fighting against yourself.
Or maybe you're pushing too close to the center of the fulcrum on the teeter-totter. No, motherfucker, move down here. There's more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And you're just like, this teeter-totter doesn't work. No, move to the edge. That's how physics works.
Peace, you got anything for us, man, before we head on out of here?
Yeah, man, I think it's great. You know, I have been playing around with some of the tools as much as I can for the last. I've probably been playing around with GPT for close to a year or so. And I definitely have been poking around with some of the stuff Mike's been working on with building out the Stacks AI project, which is iterated and iterated and iterated in the last few months. It's like went from being this to that to this to becoming a lot more all encompassing. And obviously it's a tremendous tool. It's a huge productivity quantifier, you know. So the more people that have access and use these tools, the more productivity our entire civilization experiences. So if we look at it from all productivity is good point of view, then we need to get these tools into as many hands as possible. Nobody's going to go and do that unless we do it, right? Like, we have to look at it that way. It's important to get these tools out to people, not just to develop how to use them, but to get that information. Same thing with onboarding people to Stacks and onboarding people to Bitcoin and being able to use that blockchain technology in a mass adoption way. We need to get the more people we can get on board to using AI rapidly, the less controlled, the less siloed, the less the less capacity there is to censor the access to it broadly. So yes, get out and use it.
100%. Just to Peace's point and to Mike's earlier point, if you're new here in Bitcoin, in this world, for those of us who have been here a while, and then for the people who are here even earlier than us, it was always, oh, that's a stupid idea. It's a bad idea. Ignore it. Don't pay attention. And now what do you see? Every single week you have these large institutional TradFi funds buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin for their ETF products. Okay, you're going to see Bitcoin as a way to keep pension funds solvent. You're going to see all of these things are going to happen. And if you haven't paid attention up until this point, by the time you start paying attention, you're going to realize, wow, I can now get much less Bitcoin than I would have been able to get had I been paying attention for years now. Okay, so you can also apply that to AI. You can apply that to where we're on development, and you can apply that to, you're always going to have a part of human nature that is going to desire monopolies or as close to monopolies as possible. And in this particular instance, this is a tool that is so powerful that the last thing you want to do is just be absorbed by that Borg. You want to find out now how you can participate, how you can learn, how you can become independent with it. What are the promising ways to not just fund its independent development, but to take part in it so that there's always an alternative. Right. I think that's probably where my head's at right now. And Mike will give you the last word. And again, thanks for coming on today, man. This was a great discussion. I think everyone who watched it has enjoyed this. And if you missed out, well, you missed out. Try to catch the rerun.
I think Gibson said the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
Yeah.
Right. And we see that. We know that. It's hard to... If someone hasn't prepared their brain for it, there's only so much, you know what I mean?
Right.
If somebody hasn't, like, I just asked you if you knew John Jay. You did. So I didn't really have to explain to you the fact that he went to Span. You already knew that. Right. If you didn't, the point would be completely lost on you. I find that there is an emerging group of people that are making invisible handshakes using word signals that other people don't understand. Everywhere I go. Hey, what do you use for that? You use Superbase? No, I'm using Kafka with a bit of Python, Nomic, and blah, blah, blah. If you don't know what that means, you're kind of locked out. Right. But if you do know what these language nomenclature handshakes mean, you can become a part of the ecosystem. I will say that from a forgiving perspective, the Stacks ecosystem is populated by people with pretty good vibes overall. And what I'm excited to do is introduce the business owners that have services for the youth to this ecosystem, because the youth are digital natives. Right. And because they understand culture, I think they can be better traders than their parents. In fact, we're seeing older brothers give $5,000 accounts to their younger brothers, and having the younger brothers make $100,000 and say, what do we do next now? And they're like, what'd you just do? So that is something that hasn't happened yet. But when Gen Z, and they're already there, when their older parents start giving them their trading accounts and be like, hey, do something useful, learn financial literacy by trading meme coins. Forget about algorithmic traders. You're going to have Gen Alpha creating their own cultural tokens, and we haven't seen that yet. That's about to happen. They're like 13, 14 years old. Man, it's game over.
Yeah. And on that point, thanks again, gentlemen, for coming. This was a lot of fun. I always like to learn something new. And Mike, you're welcome on anytime, brother. We appreciate your insight. And thanks again to Velar for helping us put this on today. If you haven't yet, go check out Velar. Check out DeOrganized. There's going to be a lot of news coming. We're just in that part of the market where everything's going to kind of coalesce and speed up. Okay, this everything in life is cycles, and you're in a cycle within a cycle. That's really getting ready to kick off. So pay attention, stay tuned, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks for watching.
Thank y'all. Thank you, Jack, for having us today.
Take it easy.
Oh. Wasn't.
Let's go with that right.